Keanu Reeves walked through the gleaming glass doors, where everything screamed wealth and luxury. A global icon, but today, he wasn't greeted with respect. With his humble appearance, he was met with contemptuous glares and whispered judgments. A salesperson turned away, a manager approached with challenge. But little did they know, standing before them was a man whose inner strength far outweighed any outer appearance. What happened next wasn't just a story, it was a lesson that will keep your eyes glued to the screen. Don't just hear about it. Witness how Keanu transformed the scene, and perhaps, how you see human worth. The story begins. A typical morning in San Francisco, the sky as blue as an invitation to something extraordinary. Keanu Reeves strolled down the street, casually dressed in a black leather jacket and well-worn jeans. His calm demeanor stood in stark contrast to the admiring glances from a few passers-by who recognized him. He had always been this way, someone who never allowed fame to alter who he was. With a simple smile, he waved at a fan, thanked someone for a compliment, and continued walking, unhurried. Midway through his walk, he stopped at a coffee shop he had frequented for years. He greeted the barista by name, as always. "Good morning, Mike. How's it going?" Keanu smiled lightly, his voice warm and familiar. "I'm good, Keanu. Same coffee as usual?" Mike replied, flashing a bright smile before returning to his work. Keanu nodded, soaking in the peaceful atmosphere of the shop. "Thanks, Mike. Sometimes, a simple cup of coffee can make everything feel right," he said, his eyes gleaming with quiet appreciation. He quietly waited for his coffee, his mind drifting. There was something he had been searching for over the past few months. It wasn't just a fleeting desire, but a combination of his love for cars and the wish to do something meaningful. Perhaps a rare car, one that he could restore and use for a good cause. Maybe a charitable gift or a special gesture of gratitude. With his coffee in hand, Keanu continued on his way. A luxury car dealership he had in mind, renowned for its high-end and unique vehicles, was where he hoped to find what he was looking for. As he entered the dealership through the glass doors, Keanu immediately sensed the atmosphere of affluence. The polished floors reflected the flawless beauty of the displayed cars. The soft sound of footsteps echoed on the plush carpet, and the air was thick with the scent of fresh leather. Well-dressed employees moved gracefully, attending to customers in expensive suits and elegant accessories. Keanu, in his simplicity, was almost invisible. A few curious glances were cast his way, followed by whispered murmurs. He ignored the gossip and focused on what mattered most. His gaze stopped at a car at the far end of the showroom. A rare model, as if it had come from another era. Every detail of the car drew his attention. Its sleek curves, the perfect paint, and the aura of uniqueness that he had been searching for. Determined, Keanu approached a salesperson who was engrossed in their phone, completely unaware of his presence. The store's atmosphere was quiet, broken only by the soft tapping of a keyboard and the low hum of the engines around him. "Excuse me, could you tell me more about this model?" Keanu asked, his voice calm and polite as ever. He didn't expect undue attention, but at least a basic response about the product. The salesperson glanced up briefly but offered only a cursory look. There was no sign of warmth or enthusiasm. The reply came in a tone of indifference. "Wait a second, I'll call someone else." The salesperson turned and walked away without a second glance, returning to their phone. Keanu stood there, watching the salesperson disappear. His face remained serene, but there was a subtle shift. A slight furrow of his brow, barely noticeable, indicating that the situation was beginning to annoy him. Still, he remained still, focused on the car that had captured his attention. Meanwhile, the air around him seemed to thicken, not through direct actions but through the looks and whispers exchanged between them. "So, does he know where he is?" one whispered. "Doesn't look like he's planning to buy anything," another responded. Keanu heard them but pretended not to care. He gently rubbed his chin, a subtle gesture to mask his discomfort. He chose not to react, at least not yet. Standing beside the car, he continued to wait for a response. Then he noticed someone approaching. It was the manager, walking with a stern gait and an evaluative gaze. The discomfort in the air seemed to intensify, as though each step the manager took carried the weight of judgment. The manager finally stopped in front of Keanu. He looked at the car, then turned to the man studying it, a faint smile playing on his lips. "This model is very unique, extremely rare," the manager said, his tone more of a challenge than an explanation. "Exactly what I'm looking for," Keanu replied, his voice firm yet still polite. The manager assessed him from head to toe, his gaze filled with skepticism and disdain. "I hope you're ready," the manager said, his eyes never leaving Keanu's. "This car isn't for just anyone." Keanu held his gaze steady, saying nothing. He merely smiled slightly, almost imperceptibly, but his eyes never wavered, never backed down. The manager took a step back, crossing his arms in front of his chest. What no one knew was that Keanu was not just any ordinary customer. The man before them wasn't just someone looking to buy a car, he was one of the world's most admired movie stars, not only for his talent but also for his integrity and humility. When the truth about him came to light, the aftermath wouldn't just surprise people, it would be unforgettable. Keanu stood by the rare car, intently analyzing every detail. The sleek paint, the smooth body, the classic design. He couldn't help but marvel at it. This was the car he had been searching for. Yet the atmosphere around him seemed out of place for the moment. The stares and hushed whispers only added to the growing discomfort. After a while, the manager finally appeared. Scott, a tall man with a stern demeanor and sharp eyes, walked toward Keanu, each step deliberate as though every movement was calculated to assert his position. He stopped at a distance, crossed his arms, and wore a smile that felt more like a challenge than a courtesy. "Are you interested in this model?" Scott asked, his tone almost mocking. "Yes, it's an impressive car. I'd like to know more about it," Keanu responded, maintaining his calm. Scott eyed him up and down, his gaze lingering on Keanu's worn jeans and the old leather jacket. He raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised at the audacity of the man standing before him, dressed in such attire. "Interesting," Scott muttered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "This is one of our most exclusive models. Very few people get to see it, let alone own it." Keanu stood firm, though the tension in the air had thickened. Scott took a step to the side, almost as if to prevent Keanu from getting closer to the car. "Did you know this car costs more than some homes in Pacific Heights? This isn't something just anyone can take home," Scott continued, his voice sharp. Keanu furrowed his brow but remained composed. "I know, that's why I'm here," he said, trying to disregard the hostility from the manager. Scott let out a dry laugh, the sound more condescending than humorous. He crossed his arms again, leaning slightly forward. "Let me put it bluntly. Cars like this attract a certain kind of customer. People who understand its value, who know what they're buying. And with all due respect, you don't exactly fit the profile of our clientele," Scott said, his eyes narrowing as they swept over Keanu's clothes, filled with disdain. He gestured widely at Keanu's outfit. Silence descended, heavy and palpable. A few employees stopped their work to observe, while others pretended not to hear. Keanu didn't respond immediately, instead locking eyes with Scott for a long moment, as if weighing his words carefully. "Curious, how do you manage to judge someone by their clothes? That says more about you than it does about me," Keanu finally spoke, his tone still calm but resolute. Scott squinted, clearly irritated by the response. He stepped closer, invading Keanu's personal space, lowering his voice but still carrying an undertone of bitterness. "Listen here, pal. I deal with guys like you all the time. They come in, look at the cars, dream a little, then walk out without spending a dime. If you're here just to pretend, I'd rather you didn't waste my time or my team's." Keanu didn't flinch, but his posture now conveyed something different. No longer just patience, but a quiet resolve in his eyes. "So, if I'm not here to dream, what then?" he asked, his voice even. Scott chuckled dryly, shaking his head as though Keanu's question was absurd. "Then I'd say you're in the wrong place. This place is for people who can afford it, for people who have something to prove. Honestly, you don't look like you have either." The tension in the room thickened, more uncomfortable than before. Keanu stared at Scott for a few seconds, the dissatisfaction now transforming into something deeper, almost a restrained anger. He smiled faintly, not out of amusement, but as someone who had come to understand the man standing before him. Funny, I've always thought that true luxury is treating others with respect. Maybe you should reconsider that, Keanu said, his voice calm yet sharp. Keanu stood his ground, facing Scott, now radiated anger and contempt with every word. The tension in the room was so thick, it felt as though it could be cut with a knife. The employees and customers around them couldn't hide the fact that they were watching this confrontation unfold. Scott's hostile tone grew sharper, as if he needed to win this argument to assert his dominance. "People like you are just here to waste everyone's time," Scott said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "This isn't a stroll through the park, and it certainly isn't a place for dreamers in old coats and empty pockets." Keanu tilted his head slightly, his gaze calm yet piercing, as if he could see straight through the man before him. He inhaled deeply, choosing each word carefully. "Funny how you talk about wasting time when you're busy judging others by their clothes instead of who they truly are. Perhaps you should think about what really matters," Keanu responded, his voice steady, yet resolute. Scott's eyes narrowed, his face reddening with fury. He took a step forward, invading Keanu's personal space, making the atmosphere tense and suffocating. "I know what matters," Scott yelled, venom lacing his words as if Keanu's remark had struck a deep, raw nerve. "And it sure isn't moral lessons from someone who thinks he has the right to walk in here as if he belongs. You have no idea who you're dealing with." Keanu didn't flinch, his eyes unwavering. Every word from Scott felt like a blade cutting through the air, but Keanu remained unresponsive, refusing to be drawn into his opponent's rage. His steadfastness only fueled Scott's anger further. Scott clenched his fists, trembling with fury, but Keanu stood still, as if the chaos around him could not touch him. Realizing his words had no effect, Scott completely lost control. His fury blinded him. "You don't have the right to tell me what to do," Scott shouted, raising his fist as if to threaten Keanu, or even strike him. But Keanu was undeterred. His reaction was swift, calm, as though he had faced this kind of tension before. He raised his hand and blocked Scott's punch midair. What was once an aggressive strike became nothing more than a futile gesture, stopped by Keanu's composure and patience. It was a firm yet unshowy action, restraint, not retaliation. Time seemed to pause for a moment as Scott stood frozen, shocked by how easily his punch had been stopped. The entire gallery fell silent, all eyes on the unfolding scene. Keanu stared directly into Scott's eyes, his gaze sharp yet devoid of anger. The space seemed to hold its breath in that moment, before Keanu gently but decisively released his grip from Scott's fist. "The anger you're feeling has nothing to do with me. Maybe it's time for you to look inward and face it before directing it at someone else," Keanu said, his voice low and powerful, like a warning, like a lesson Scott needed to hear. He then released Scott's fist, still calm, still unshaken. Scott stepped back, clearly still stunned, but trying to mask his vulnerability with a stiff posture. Keanu adjusted his coat, took a step back, and looked at Scott one last time. "Respect costs nothing, but for some people, it seems harder to find than any car in here," Keanu said, not waiting for a response. He turned and walked out the door. The gallery remained eerily still, only the sound of Keanu's steady footsteps echoing on the polished floor. The staff and customers stood motionless, some even holding their breath, as if they couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. Then something caught Keanu's attention. A young man stood in the corner of the shop, holding up his phone. He had captured not just the final confrontation, but seemingly the entire scene from the start. Keanu paused for a moment, his eyes meeting the young man's, who appeared anxious but resolute. The young man gave a small nod in Keanu's direction, a silent gesture of support. Keanu responded with a faint smile, almost imperceptible, before walking out the glass door and into the San Francisco sunlight. Inside, Scott struggled to regain his composure, but the silence and the accusing stares from the staff made it clear that things had changed. The video the young man had recorded would not stay hidden for long, and when the world saw what had transpired in that gallery, the consequences would be inevitable. The next morning, the entire world knew the story. The video that the young man had posted on social media quickly went viral. Within just a few hours, the footage was shared by thousands of people, all enraged by the way Keanu Reeves had been treated. The contrast was striking. A man known for his humility being humiliated by an arrogant individual. The video began with Scott ignoring Keanu and making disrespectful remarks, but the real turning point came when the manager attempted to attack Keanu, only to be calmly and chillingly stopped by him. Keanu's line, "Respect costs nothing, but it's probably rarer than any car here," instantly became a viral quote, appearing in posts, memes, and even news headlines. Online articles were relentless in their criticism. How could anyone treat Keanu Reeves like this? He's one of the kindest and most humble people in Hollywood. This manager clearly thinks he's superior. What a shame for this dealership. Keanu, as always, handles arrogant people with grace. Absolute legend. Here's the lesson: never judge someone based on their appearance. Entertainment blogs and news outlets quickly picked up the story. It wasn't just about disrespecting a customer, but an insult to one of the most respected actors in the world. The story quickly expanded into a broader discussion about discrimination and prejudice in luxury spaces like this dealership. The public didn't just defend Keanu, they condemned discriminatory behavior and elitism in such establishments. The dealership immediately faced severe backlash. Its social media accounts were flooded with negative comments demanding an explanation and an apology. The wave of criticism came from every corner of the world, with many declaring boycotts and calling for the manager's firing. Scott tried to justify his actions, but each statement only made things worse. His explanations were filled with meaningless excuses and no real remorse. "It was just a misunderstanding. I didn't recognize Mr. Reeves right away, and my behavior was misunderstood." The public didn't accept these justifications. The collective outrage seemed unstoppable. Employees at the dealership, fearing for their jobs, began speaking to the press anonymously, confirming that Scott's attitude wasn't new. He had always treated people this way, regardless of their wealth. He always thought of himself as better than everyone else, one employee revealed, which only fueled the public's anger even further. The dealership lost important customers, and sales plummeted. No one wanted to be associated with such a notorious establishment. As the world buzzed with the scandal, Keanu remained silent. He had never been one to seek revenge or escalate conflicts. At home, in the simplicity that defined him, he reflected on what had happened. This situation wasn't anything extraordinary. Discrimination based on appearance, social status, or financial standing was all too familiar, and he didn't want this experience to be just another isolated incident. He decided to do something meaningful. Keanu shared his thoughts with a close friend. "The video is out there, and people are reacting, but I don't want this to just be another scandal. I want to do something that truly inspires change." "What will you do?" his friend asked. "I'll handle it my way," Keanu replied, a slight but determined smile on his face. Keanu knew he had to return to the dealership, not for revenge, but to turn this situation into a powerful lesson. After hanging up the phone, he thought about the car he still wanted. It lingered in his mind, symbolizing what he could transform it into. "I need to go back," he thought. The question was, what would he do when he returned? A few days later, the video continued to dominate social media and headlines. Keanu Reeves' name was still hot, but, as always, he remained out of the limelight and avoided making public statements. Still, he knew this story couldn't end without a meaningful conclusion. That afternoon, Keanu returned to the dealership. There was no fanfare surrounding his visit, no bodyguards, no cameras following him, just him and his quiet presence. But this time, everything had changed. Everyone in the dealership knew exactly who he was. The staff froze when he entered, some looking worried, others ashamed. Scott, the manager, stood behind the counter, visibly tense. The showroom, once bustling, now looked eerily empty, a clear reflection of the strong boycott they were facing. Keanu walked over to the car he had been eyeing from the start, placing his hand on its body, his fingers gently gliding across the surface as he had done before, examining every detail. But this time, the tension wasn't in the car, it was in the air. He could feel Scott's gaze on him, filled with fear and an unmistakable regret that was impossible to hide. Finally, Scott gathered enough courage to approach him, though his demeanor was completely different from a few days ago. He seemed smaller, almost defeated. "Mr. Reeves," Scott began, his voice low and controlled. "I want to apologize for what happened. I think we started off on the wrong foot, and I hope we can try again. Perhaps I can introduce you to the car you've been interested in." Keanu turned slowly, locking eyes with Scott. The manager swallowed hard, not daring to hold Keanu's gaze for long. "Try again?" Keanu asked, his voice calm yet icy. "I'm not sure you understand. The issue here isn't just how you treated me, it's how you treat everyone else." Scott opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. Keanu took a step back, his gaze still fixed on Scott. "Respect is not something you bargain for. It's not something you give only to those you think deserve it. It's a fundamental. Either you have it or you don't," Keanu said, his voice reverberating throughout the room. Scott attempted to reply, but Keanu raised his hand slightly, signaling for him to remain silent. "I came here looking for something special, something meaningful to me. But what I found cannot be fixed with an apology," Keanu continued. "That's why I won't be purchasing this car. Not from this dealership." Keanu's words hit like a heavy blow, causing Scott to shrink back. The surrounding staff and customers stood still, quietly listening to every word he said. Keanu made his way toward the door, but before leaving, he turned back to look at Scott one last time. "I hope this will be a lesson, not just for you, but for everyone here. Luxury is not an exclusive car or a high price tag. True luxury is treating others with respect. And unfortunately, that seems rarer than any model you have here." With those words, Keanu walked out of the dealership, leaving behind a thick silence. In the days following the incident, the video continued to circulate, but now, people weren't just talking about what had happened in the store. They were discussing how Keanu had turned a moment of disrespect into a lesson that went beyond the event itself. He became a symbol of humility and the power of silence. Keanu purchased a car from a modest dealership, one that prioritized human connection over ostentation. The owner, a middle-aged man named John, was known for treating every customer equally, no matter who they were. When Keanu walked into the dealership, he was greeted with a genuine smile. "Welcome, how can I assist you today?" John asked. "I'm looking for something special, a car that represents a bigger purpose." "I think you can help me," Keanu replied. The conversation was warm, free of judgment or prejudice. In the end, Keanu found the car he had been searching for. He took a photo with John and his team, posting it on social media with a simple yet powerful caption: "True luxury is being treated with respect. Thank you for reminding me of that." The post quickly went viral, once again bringing attention to the new dealership as an example of how customer service should be done. People flocked to the store, drawn by the idea of a place where dignity was prioritized. Keanu's gesture sparked a global movement. People began sharing their own stories of discrimination, prejudice, and resilience. A wave of campaigns promoting respect and inclusion emerged, calling on businesses to rethink their practices and behavior. Hashtags like #RespectIsLuxury and #LearnFromKeanu dominated social media. Celebrities, activists, and brands joined the movement, using the moment for reflection. Even luxury car manufacturers began to adopt more inclusive narratives, fearing the reputational crisis that had befallen the dealership. Meanwhile, the store where the incident had started continued to face repercussions. Scott was fired after the wave of criticism and the loss of numerous customers. The dealership underwent a restructuring, but the damage to its reputation was too severe. The incident became a cautionary tale in the business world, serving as a clear reminder of the importance of respect. "I never intended for this to be my story," he said, his voice as humble as ever. "It's not about me or what I do. It's about how we treat each other. Respect should never depend on who you are, how much money you have, or what you do for a living. It's a basic right, something everyone deserves." When asked what he had learned from the experience, Keanu smiled softly before responding, I've learned that even difficult moments can be an opportunity for change. Respect costs nothing, but when we give it, we create something that can change the world. The car that Keanu purchased became a symbol. It was restored and auctioned off at a charity event, raising millions of dollars for organizations promoting equality and inclusivity. At the event, Keanu delivered a short but unforgettable speech. This car was just an item until this story unfolded. Now, it carries a greater value. The lesson that we all have the power to inspire change as long as we are guided by respect. The evening concluded with applause, not only for Keanu but for the message he had shared with the world. An incident that began with discrimination and disrespect had transformed into a story of transformation and inspiration. Keanu proved that even in the face of injustice, one could act with dignity and turn something negative into something positive. The world kept moving forward, but the lesson would endure. Even in the simplest of moments, respect is what truly defines us. This story serves as a powerful reminder of the impact respect can have on both individuals and communities. How would you handle a situation where your integrity and respect are challenged? Have you ever had to stand up for what's right, even when it was difficult? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice could inspire others and spark positive change. If you found this story meaningful, don't hesitate to share it with your friends and family to help spread the message of respect and integrity. Thank you for supporting the channel. Please like, share, and subscribe to receive the latest updates. The stories are collected from various sources and do not represent any individual or organization. They are shared with the intention of spreading human values in life and have been rewritten with the support of AI. If there are any mistakes, kindly overlook them with understanding. Wishing you all the best in life.